In Canada, protesters still take to the streets for Black Lives Matter over the shooting of a U.S. citizen, and people call into question whether the police should be defunded and disbanded. This is the Great White North Report. Now, over the weekend and last week, thousands take to Toronto streets to protest anti-black racism and police brutality. They're claiming it's 2020 and we need to do better. First of all, what does the death of George Floyd have to do with anything with Canada? Yes, we have racism, but everyone's racist. It's like people are trying to tell me that, hey, blacks can't be racist. Yes, they can. And they're full of shit if anyone says otherwise. I'm tired of all these hypocrites using things for their own political agendas. I've said it over and over again. Everyone is racist to a point. I have yet to meet a non-racist person in some shape or form. So I'm telling these people to get a life and stop wasting our time, because I have no sympathy for these people. As for police brutality, yes, the police can sometimes be brutal. I agree there are some bad apples, but 99% of the police officers we have are actually really decent law-abiding people themselves and do whatever they can to defuse certain situations. Are the police any more racist than anyone else? They're sure they have their own racism and biases. Everyone does. They have to be a little more careful because they're in a position of certain power. But I'll take the Canadian police over the police in other countries. Just go to other countries like China, North Korea, and Africa and see how they work. And all this Black Lives Matter stuff, hey, all lives matter, buddy. And these people are taking advantage of something when they shouldn't be. Wasting our time, especially when we have a pandemic going on, is far more serious than that. Does racism exist? Yes, it does, and we can do. But when I think of racism, I think of hate crimes, like the Jews have been suffering for centuries. So some retailers, they boarded up their buildings in advance of protests because they're afraid of looting, which happens often during a protest of this size. So people think it's only black people they were racist towards. No, the First Nations people, they see more racism than blacks in Canada. And it's not just whites directing that racism towards them. It's also the blacks and the Asians and other minorities that come across. Now this one says defunding the police could mean replacing officers with social workers. Are you out of your mind? What, do you want to turn Toronto into the next Somalia? The next Mogadishu? What's a social worker going to do when they're confronted with somebody with a gun in their hand? In fact, most people want more police than less, than fewer. More funding for police. I do. I don't want fewer police. I don't want to defund the police. I want them to keep working. I want more of them. They keep our streets safe at night. In fact, I wish they could do more. For simple break and enterings, they can't do much. Now, thousands in Quebec rally to protest racism and police brutality. Now, Quebec has their religious ban law, their secular laws. So people are saying that's a form of racism. No, that's a way to protect your way of life, too. There is such a thing as a separation between church and state. Now, this one, Indigenous women, this one I do agree with. There is a certain amount of discrimination towards them. A lot of Indigenous women have disappeared over the years, probably murdered, and it's really sad. I wish that we could do more. That one's got to stop, and I'd like to see more First Nations people in the RCMP policing themselves, especially at the reservation level. I believe they do have reservation police, but why aren't they doing what they should be doing? This even happened in Guelph. I'm like thinking, are you kidding me? If anything, blacks in Canada have risen far above what they were 50, 60 years ago. Black culture has really taken hold here. Just look at movies, TV shows, and music. And going back to Toronto, most Toronto shootings are related to street gangs. And you want to defund the police at a time when the street gangs are on a rise in Toronto? Are you kidding? This is why people are leaving Toronto and moving south. They want to get away from the gang violence. All you have to do is go to Stats Canada and see the stats for a lot of different things. Shooting, stabbing, beating, strangulation, other. And you can see that there hasn't been a lot of changes since 2014. There's 100 more homicides. And shootings have... 2017 was a pretty bad year for shootings. Not sure what the numbers for 2019. They haven't been released yet. And Ontario, being the most populous province, would obviously have the most homicides in Canada. Quebec, for its size, doesn't have that many. Violent crimes in Canada, again, Ontario leads the way by a long shot over Quebec. So you just have to go to Wikipedia to see how many times there's been police brutality, and I'll tell you that too. There's a list of all the ones that I found, And it doesn't happen very often. The most recent was Regis Korchinski-paquet. After a domestic conflict with a request to take her to the Center of Addiction and Mental Health. We still don't know if she jumped off the balcony or not. Her case is right now ongoing, and it's interesting that the mother retracted the previous statement that she witnessed her husband's alleged murder. They've obtained a statement of another witness as well as security camera footage of the balcony and are currently evaluating the circumstances. So it is an ongoing investigation, and the people in the Black Lives Matter in Toronto have taken it out of context and are using it again against the police and the government. Now, does stuff happen? Yes, most assuredly. But 99% of the time, no. Police officers get shot and killed too. Since 1975, 100 police officers have died of homicide, and firearms are often most used to kill police. Robbery calls led to most police deaths. So all this can be found online. It's not hard to find. Just do a little digging. Make sure you fact check everything and check multiple sources. I use Stats Canada because it is the government website. CBC does a pretty good job too, usually. And it does happen where people are shot by police, but more often it's... So this young man was shot by police after calling 911 on himself. Turns out that he suffers from schizophrenia. According to them, 4 or 5 times when they were concerned about his well-being, police would then come take him away to a nearby hospital. Well, it depends which police officer. Not every police officer is going to be the same. And it turned out he confronted them with a knife in the kitchen and wouldn't put it down even after they stunned him. And then he was shot. Now, was it a case of police brutality? Police were probably a little too brutal. After stunning them, they probably could have wrestled him to the ground. But again, police officer has to take everything into account. But it's an unfortunate accident. Again, the police officer didn't go to the house with the intent to kill. Which brings me back to George Floyd. At first, I was really sympathetic. Like I said, he should never have happened. And the officers will be charged with manslaughter. The 3 white officers and 1 Asian officer that no one talks about. But it turns out that Mr. Floyd had been in jail for 5 years for first-degree felony with a firearm. It turns out that him and his gang broke into a pregnant woman's house. Mr. Floyd put his gun to the pregnant woman's belly while his gang ransacked the house. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for Mr. Floyd in that respect, but I do not want him to die, obviously, and it's a terrible tragedy that way. We didn't know the whole story until recently, and we have to wait and see how the case goes against the police. But as far as Black Lives Matter and protests in Canada, I'm not in favor of it. Why should I feel guilty over anything? Anyway, that's all I have on that. Until next time, this is Great White North Report.
Proud to be Canadian. We're awfully nice to strangers, our manners